This is the Take Your Turn 2022 Tournament Go Event Round 2 recap. There are 5 rounds and 9 players. Each set is 2 games with players switching colors between games. In our recap, we'll be looking at Game 1 in each set and highlighting a particular move or two, as well as discussing the general flow of the match. For more detailed game reviews, you can visit my YouTube channel, Arnfasta. Before we start, just need to note that Mr. Cat got a bye this round, and Gorgeous Goose vs. Faded Sun ended in a draw because they weren't able to play their games. We're going to start then by looking at Atreides vs. Sequoia, or Artyom vs. Sequoia, and the game begins with Black going for a center and influence-based play. What's interesting to me is that Sequoia tries to prevent Artyom or Atreides from getting an easy advantage by jumping right in at the beginning here with a d16 play in the upper left. Right there. And so Sequoia is looking to dig out this upper left corner. And I think does a great job of jumping in, trying to prevent Black from getting this easy early advantage and managing to succeed in making a really strong influence here. And likely some territory. Now at G19, when Atreides plays Gote, a move that cedes initiative, Sequoia uses that initiative with the follow play at M18 to begin a series of moves where Atreides ends up continuously responding or feeling the need to respond. And so if we look, we can see the ways in which we have Sequoia constantly putting on this pressure as white, and Atreides feeling that they need to answer, and so they are the ones who, for a large part of this game now, are on the defensive, constantly responding for the most part to Sequoia's incursions, but not able to make many incursions themselves. And the result, we jumped a little bit forward. I'll do that one a little bit slower. We have some capturing here. We can see now by move 66, suddenly what started out is a very open space, with Black having the advantage with Tengen there, has become a space in which Sequoia now has a really solid wall. And this continues as the border gets solidified. Keep going a little bit more. They kind of are getting the edges here, and then we see that Sequoia is trying to dig out more and see what they can get away with, see what they can take away from Black. So we have this section of it, and then the bottom gets a little more settled. And we continue really all the way at the end. Not much changes in terms of the general spacing of it. The main thing is just that Sequoia was able to get a little bit more here. Now, the one thing I think is important to note, and we definitely talk about this I talk about this with Ruler in the full review, is that in this situation, Atreides is obviously looking for, how can I get back the points I'm missing? How can I begin to turn the game around? And obviously from this point, especially with how much is carved here, that's difficult. But when you're in this situation, trying to look at these, where are these existing spaces that I might be able to exploit? Looking for the cutting points, like the one, like this L9 stone and the cutting points here, looking for large open areas like this one that isn't actually filled until move 138, almost at the very end of the game. There may have been opportunities there for Atreides to not only make life there, but importantly, begin to pull points away from Sequoia. Having said that, I think Sequoia did a really nice job in this game of setting the pace of the game and maintaining control. And Atreides did a nice job of responding, but wasn't able to re-seize the initiative and use it, or make enough use of it when they were able to get it. So the final result is a win for Sequoia by 113.5 points, and the match went 2-0 in favor of Sequoia. We're going to go ahead and look at our second game, which is Spadius versus Exmo. Spadius is playing Black, Exmo is white. And again, it doesn't take long, though it's a little longer. We have this small exchange in the center here, bottom center. But then by move 14, we have another deep dive. another attempt to say, hey, you look like you're trying to build a lot of framework, especially with the play here at the 5-5 point. I'm not going to just let that happen. And I think that over the course of a few moves here, we see Spadius begin to move along the fourth line here, and Exmo taking that third line. And so we eventually have the formation of this great wall by Spadius. So then the real question in a situation like this is, this wall gives you a lot of power. It means that you can play much further out with a lot more safety than you normally would or would otherwise. And if you can utilize that, you can you can be very aggressive. Ruler pointed out in the full review, looking at a play like G16 to pincer, looking to be aggressive is a great thing to sort of tune your mind to when you have something like this great wall. At the same time, the other big thing to be concerned about is if your opponent is able to keep you crunched down and not allow you to get your stones out and get the space that you want, then you end up with a big overconcentration of stones when a smaller wall, for example, might have done this, in that case, accomplished the same thing. So you end up with a bunch of less useful stones than you would have otherwise. We're going to go ahead and just watch this play out for a second. There's a comment I want to make here when we get a little bit further, but you can see that the bottom center and then the bottom left and then the bottom right both have some fighting. And I think that if we watch this little bit further, the resolution on the right side. So this is a small thing right around, there we go. I was looking at C10. I just want to make the note that I really am impressed with the way in which both Spadius and Exmo on a couple occasions, so the ones that stick out to me immediately are these two plays here. It's really common for players to want to capture. It's when they know that they have it, they want to spend that extra move to capture, to lock it down for simplicity's sake, for cleanness sake. And as long as you've read it out correctly, if you read it out correctly and you can avoid having to put down that extra stone, that's another stone you can make to move elsewhere to move you further. And I really like how both players here have done nice jobs of reading out and seeing when something is truly dead, when they can even let another move go and they'll be fine. And so then look towards where else they could play. And in a really complicated battle like this, where you're dealing with a number of these interlocked groups who all have liberties that rely on each other, I think that seeing that kind of play and is really fantastic, because being behind by a move or two in this kind of scenario can be absolutely deadly. So I was really happy to see that the players were recognizing that on multiple occasions, because it's such a difficult thing to recognize at times. And for newer players or players who are still sort of getting a feel for the full fundamentals, it can feel wrong not to just take something. But by, when you learn to do it as they have, you can see the power it affords you. Those extra moves are so critical in these fights that are just one or two liberty differences. If we go a little bit further, I just want to note as we watch this play out how we have white has successfully kind of carved a large space up here, really pushed black in, and for the moment has taken these stones in this wall and really negated its power by not allowing black to get any sort of large jump with which to begin to make any sort of inroads. And we can see here this sort of gets settled when it gets locked down. One other thing to note too is just there's an invasion here that happens. So this invasion here, I don't believe should have worked, but what happens is as Spadius is pushing along and Exmo is trying to kill, I think that Exmo gets a little misreads this just a bit, that it looks natural to go ahead and try to hit the cut so that you can, so that you can split these two stones and create two weaker groups. The issue is when that happens, you begin to push down your own liberties on this group right here and put yourself in a more vulnerable situation. So there's still a couple plays. I think that rather than the B15 and trying to push down on black liberties or prevent the formation of an eye or the possibility of an eye, extending outward should still have made things okay here. But Spottius, when that B15 play goes down, Spottius does a great job of immediately snatching up those stones and being able to make life here. And I think this is a good example, too, of where Spottius didn't end up with a ton of points in this upper left section, but they did end up with life. And the amount of stones here is a lot of stones that are no longer white points. The issue overall is just that there is one large group for black in terms of territory, but other than that, everything else is in the single digits here. And so white just has more on the board. And we get to the final result. The final result is that white, or Exmo, wins by 40.5 points. The match did go 1-1. Last game we're going to go ahead and look at is Zoronix versus Just Your Eventual Ruler, or Zero Lifer versus Newbie 101. So Zero Lifer, or Zoronix, is black here. The game starts out pretty standard. Both players take a corner. Zoronix then approaches here, and it feels like an even trade as they play out a Joseki, play out an opening sequence, a standard opening sequence, and then Zoronix takes the lower left. And then Ruler as white, or Newbie 101, Ruler goes for the center play early on, and Ruler talks a lot about this and other full analysis of some games that I've looked over with him, but in going for the center play, it happens after there are two bases from which, or two sides from which, Ruler is looking to work from. So it happens a little bit later, but in so doing, has a lot more immediate strength. And then it's this move at M4 on move 25 by Zoronix is black that I think sets off a big chain here we're going to look at real quick. And in this situation, I think the thing to really highlight is you have both players trying to kill the other. The best case scenario is that one of them dies. And if Zoronix dies and Ruler as white wins, that would mean that Ruler has would have a really strong setup here to be able to push the corner. It would do a lot to strengthen the Tengen stone, well, not actually Tengen because that would be K10, but the center stone around the center, and would really help in this large influence-based play. It would also do a lot to strengthen these groups and try to prevent or lock down shenanigans that might happen in this space because it is still open. And conversely, if Zoronix were the one to win, if black were able to kill these white stones or these white stones on either side, not only would it mean an enormous strength on the bottom right or center right, it would also mean the possibility to try to link up with the bottom left, and it would mean the ability to put very strong pressure into or towards white's center influence here and try to disrupt this influence play. But we can see there's just a very complicated back and forth that extends across the board. I think this was a really fun fight to try to read. I'd still like to do more to see what other possibilities exist and how players could have played them out a little differently. But it is challenging to read this, especially in the moment when you have a number of different groups that you are trying to juggle with, and a number of points in which you can you have vulnerabilities. You know, each player is looking at different vulnerabilities they're trying to manage. The last thing about this I want to mention is just when you get in a situation like this influence-based play that Ruler is doing can really help you in situations like this because you've got stones that are already out in the field. So as Zoronix is trying to push out, trying to get out from underneath the white's tyranny, get out underneath these stones that are trying to trap black in, the influence-based play and the use of these stones early on allow you to suddenly have a lot more power to create these big giant nets to make that more difficult, make it harder to run out. Conversely, we also have Xeronics tried to go inward to try to make enough space to create two eyes, in the hopes that they can create life. And again, we have Ruler walking that tightrope of, you need to be aggressive enough. If your goal is to kill this, you need to be aggressive enough in order to prevent Black from getting enough liberties and space to make eyes. But if you are too aggressive, if you're not careful in how you lock them down, you can create your own. You can open up weaknesses yourself that allow them to that they can exploit in order to be able to make life. So you also walk that tight rope of trying to be just strong enough so that they have nowhere they can go, but not squeezing too hard that they sort of slip through your fingers. If we go here, I wanted to highlight move 105 is when Xeronics goes ahead and is able to secure that first eye, and you need 2 to be safe. So we have this first territory in here, and it looks like it might be, do a triangle here. It looks like because you have these 2 weak points here that it might be a false eye. But in fact, if you try to play here as white, Black can simply connect, and in so doing, you have an eye that's a legitimate eye that can't be just reduced down to nothing. So that's 1, but you still need 2. And it's this follow-up play at M4 that is really, really well done. This move is threatening 2 things. It's removing 1 weakness, and it's threatening to remove the second weakness at M2 in order to make the second eye. It's also threatening to connect through here at K5 to create a second eye as well. So it puts Ruler in a situation where they don't really have a way to defend it all. And you see after that, Ruler catches on and sees very clearly that that's what has happened, which means this Black group is now alive. Xeronics did a great job in this fight of managing to make life, even in this small space. And because of that, Ruler now needs to play a pretty aggressive in order to try to take back points and turn the game around. And you can see that we have the beginning of a dive here, and then we have a further dive in here, just trying to carve out takeaway points, and then looking towards this space as well to try to make life here. But Xeronics in each of these cases is able to use the power of their existing stones to just lock down white and prevent, and white just doesn't have enough space. White doesn't have enough space in the way this played out to be able to make this work. And so by move 175, Black or Xeronics wins by resignation, and the match result is 2-0. But it's a really great game. This center battle was so important. Once that didn't work out, obviously Ruler was then scrambling to try and find a way to make it find and claw back points elsewhere. But that center battle was just so critical to this game. It was a really fun to watch and see unfold. Do want to mention as we get ready to end here that a reminder that we also did have Gorgeous Goose versus Faded Sun, but that was a draw because they couldn't play. And if you're wondering about Mr. Cat had no opponent this round, so Mr. Cat got a bye. I think overall it was a really, really solid set of games in round 2. We had more players trying to punish opponents for playing big in their opening, and I think that was really great to see, with a D16. Or even if we go and we jump back real quick, move 18 here or 14 here with R14, seeing players try to deal with their opponents who are going for these big openings was fantastic. We also saw some good technical plays with capturing and move efficiency. That was really wonderful to see. And there were just some really intricate battles that I think, were obviously very difficult to read, but I think both players in those 2 games did a really admirable job of trying to navigate what for me is one of the most fun parts of the game, when you're dealing with this this controlled chaos of balancing multiple threats and multiple liberties in different groups, and trying to weigh your weaknesses versus their weaknesses, and always be just a move ahead. Close enough that you can make it work, but securely close enough that you're not playing too much with fate. But that is a way of conclusion. That was round 2 of Take Your Turn. And for a deeper dive, you can absolutely go check out my YouTube channel if you're interested in seeing some of these games looked at with a little more depth to them, a little bit more time. As for Wargroove and chess, you can just keep it right here on the Groove of War channel. Thanks, everyone.